Hey, we're going to get started here, and thanks for coming back. I think everybody did, and that's a good sign. But anyway, so we want to talk about, in this section, we want to talk about our commitment to family. One of the things I like to tell people when I introduce myself I can say this over the last 15 months, but I have 5 children, I have 11 grandkids, and I've been married 14 months.
Pretty good record.
I am. I'm very productive. Here's the story, okay? So I was actually married 40 years, and my wife passed away. And there was a lady that I worked with that she was married 42 years, and her husband passed away. And so we kind of combined our families and got married. And so I tell her, I said, she was married, I said, you were married 42 years, I was married 40. That's 82 years, just not to each other. But when you get married when you're in your 20s, you don't have 40-something years of stuff to unlearn. Guys, it's different. Not bad, just different. I mean, just like what brand of paper towels and, I remember, we've been married about a week, and she came in, she said, I'm gonna get the towels out of the bathroom. I said, what's wrong? She said, well, it's been 3 days. I said, 3 days? This ain't no hotel. I said, I'm used to a week at least. And, but anyway, so we've enjoyed that. But I want to talk about family. I was sharing with Terry that one of the things that I've do now that all the 3 weeks I've been retired is I'm a chaplain for the St. Johns County Sheriff's Office. So I ride along with officers. And I don't know if anybody in here is in law enforcement, but I tell you, the technology has really changed. The officer I was with, they had just the day before gotten some new software about reading license plates. They used to have to pull you over and run your plate and see if it was. They don't have to do that anymore. I mean, this guy can be driving at 55 miles an hour, and I can't hardly see the car. And I watched on his screen on his computer this thing zoom in, lock in on it, run it, and tell him, and he never even slowed down. I said, wow, man, bad guys, they got it tough now. But one of the things that has taken me a little bit by surprise is how much of their work is related to families. And just the family structure is in chaos. And it seemed like everybody that we were interacting with, and I was actually brought along to work with officers, but I've spent as much time with actual people that they interact with, in those that have had a crime committed against them, those that have committed a crime, and the whole idea of the family structure is just, man, it's in chaos. And I want to be honest. I mean, I don't have a family that, everybody takes a picture on the beach and they're all wearing the same clothes and everybody's smiling and has blonde hair and blue eyes. I don't have that kind of family. But I have a family at this point that loves Jesus, and it's at least most of the time they don't have chaos. But they're the minority. And so guys, this is so important, not just for you personally, but for this community, for this church. This whole idea of commitment to family is huge. It's huge. And so we don't want to get away from that. And so the first thing, and this came across, I found this about 8 years ago, and I've read my Bible a bunch, and but this jumped out at me, and maybe you've seen this before, but I want to start in the book of Genesis, and so the first thing we're going to talk about is the beginning, which is the next slide. Yeah. All right. So the beginning. In Genesis chapter 2, it reads this in verses 8 and 9. The Lord God planted a garden in Eden in the east, and he placed the man which he had formed. The Lord God caused to grow out of the ground every tree pleasing in appearance and good for food, including the tree of life in the middle of the garden, as well as the tree of knowledge of good and evil. In verse 10, a river went out from Eden to water the garden. All right, so the beginning of the Bible is like the beginning of a movie, okay? And this chair over here is going to represent this beginning, all right? And you got to use your imagination, okay? This is a tree and this is a river, because that's what it says. There was a tree by the river. The very beginning, before God ever made man, there was this tree and a river, okay? You with me? That's the beginning of the movie. Now, you want to turn to the end of the movie, Revelation 22. Revelation 22. And this chair over here is the ending of the movie. Verse 1 of Revelation 22, last chapter of the Bible. Then he showed me the river, the water of life, clear as crystal, flowing from the throne of God out of the Lamb down the middle of the city's main street, and the tree of life was on each side of the river. So, here's what we have. We have the beginning of the movie, the beginning of everything is a tree and a river. You get to the end of the movie, guess what? It's a tree and a river. Exactly. And you know what that means? That means everything that happens in our life happens between those two trees. Everything. Okay? So when we're talking about family, you need to know that this movie started over here. And then God decided it's not just enough to have a tree and a river. I want to put some people. But he put the tree and river there first. Then he put the person. And then he brought Adam, and then he added Eve. And then they had family. So everything started right there. And guess what? At the end, when it's all said and done, and we're in this place called heaven, guess where it ends? A tree and a river. I don't know how many times I read my Bible before I saw that. I think that's pretty cool, actually. The beginning and ending. Same. And everything that happens between those two trees and those rivers. Okay? So family matters. Okay? All right, so let's, I got to see what these pictures are because I can't even remember what your notes say. All right? So where? All right? Between the trees. That's the first blank I just went over. Our commitment to our family, everything happens that we're going to talk about, our commitment to family happens between the trees. Okay? And so we're going to look at this because, you see, family matters. And it's been here from the beginning. It continues with the whole idea of the family. The psalmist would say in Psalm 127 that the whole family idea, okay? And if you look at even families in the Bible, it really matters. And families are unique. There's a story of three grown people in the same family. And they interact with Jesus, and they all interact different. Mary, Martha, and Lazarus. They're all in the same family. But they all are different. They have different qualities, like I said in the beginning, different characteristics. Okay? Your family is the zoo with different animals. Same zoo, different animals. And you need to understand God's not caught off guard by that. I mean, even Jesus knew that he had to interact with Mary, Martha, and Lazarus differently because they were different. And it's like, I don't know if there's anybody here who's ever been in the band. I have not, okay? But I do know this, that it makes a difference that everybody in the band, even though they're playing different instruments, plays the same song. It really matters, okay? You can't always hear every instrument, but you could hear an instrument if they were playing a different song, all right? And so you're not trying to make everybody in the band play the same instrument. You're just wanting them to play the same song. And so in your family, you're not trying to make everybody the same. But you do want them to sing the same song at the same time. It's not that there are times where they want to sing a song different than you. Okay? And if you don't believe that can be chaos, just have a car full of family members and ask this question. Where do you want to go eat? I mean, that can be absolute chaos. And there's always somebody in the car. It doesn't matter where you go. They're not happy. All right? I've got a granddaughter that still wants to write a letter to Chick-fil-A so they'd be open 7 days a week, because that's her place. I don't care. You know, that's the only time I love to ask, where do you want to go to eat on a Sunday? Because I know she's not going to say Chick-fil-A. All right? But, so, our whole idea of this matters, okay? Your relationship with your wife matters, okay? The relationship with your children matters, okay? And so, we're going to look at this, and we're going to go back to one verse, and we're going to pull out some things that will help us as a dad, as a grandfather, as an uncle or whatever, as a male, as a man, to be a leader in our family, because it does matter, okay? And guys, I can say this simply because I've been doing this a long time with quote, the spiritual leaders of churches, the pastors, okay? I had a conversation yesterday with a 43-year-old pastor who's broken. And his family, he's lost his family, you know? They don't want to have anything to do with him. And he kept saying, well, I just didn't see it. I just didn't see it. Guys, I don't want that to be you. I don't want you to be the one that tells that sad tale. And just because he's a pastor, he should know better, but he didn't, because he didn't see that the life that God gave him between the trees mattered. Everything mattered. And he had to work at it. I'm convinced of this. If Satan wants to ruin you, if he can't get to you, he's going to get to your wife. If he can't get to your wife, he's going to get to your kids. If he can't get to your kids, he's going to get to your grandkids. If he can't get to your grandkids, he's going to get to their friends. I'm telling you, there is a strategy. And Satan, from the very beginning, from the very beginning, wanted to divide families. We all know that. Adam and Eve. There was only two people. You ever wonder, by the way, who Adam and Eve talked about? They didn't have anybody to talk about, except maybe animals. Did you see what that goat did? Something like that. I don't know. All right. Which I'm going to stop right there. Was there a question over here from the last one that I didn't answer? I should have done question and answers, and I got all excited about trees. My original degree from college, by the way, I was in plant science, and I should have seen the tree thing, because that's what I studied, and I worked for the Department of Agriculture. I know a lot about trees, but now I know about those trees in the Bible. But anyway, did you have a question from the first session?
Well, if I'm going to be forced there, Alex, I admittedly, and maybe I missed it.
Okay.
The focus of the topic number one was our commitment to God.
Uh-huh.
But it seemed what you focused on was God's commitment to us, the picture of grace, how
Right.
God
Right.
showed us favor, the promise of grace. It's
Right.
the gift of God to us. That we're the people of grace. Yeah, we may work hard, but it's by the grace of God. And
Right.
it seemed that's God's commitment to us. And I missed.
Okay. Okay. All right. That's a great question. Great question. Okay. I started there and I went there because a lot of times when you talk about just commitment to God, people see it as just a job or something they can do. But I wanted you to see how committed God was to you. and how your commitment back to him is not something, it starts with him. Okay? But that's a great question, and I probably didn't do a good job of flipping the script, because you are right. I did focus on God's commitment to us with the idea, okay, now what are you going to do with that? When God has done everything for you, what are you going to do for him? Where are you going to take that? Where are you going to go? And so, but that's a good question. Very good question. I'm going to make a note. And
So it's a response. Our response should be the commitment because of what he's done.
right, right.
And
And
you alluded to some things in the preamble, if you will. You know, you said, be the pig, not the chicken.
yeah,
Be more than good intentions.
right. That's good. Well, and I got to be honest with you, okay? When this isn't something that I do all the time. Okay, these are all new. I mean, I spent hours on thinking through this, praying through this, because I didn't want to just show up and give you something that I had said somewhere else. I kept asking God, because we've been talking for a while about this. Originally, it was supposed to be last month, so we actually started, I think, in February, talking about this. So I've been praying and thinking about this, and nervous. Man, I've really been nervous that I do a good job. But thank you for asking that, because that's good. I should have done a better job of turning the mirror around and say, okay, this is what now you need to do. That's good. Good question. Really is. Good question. I'm convinced, by the way, the smartest guy in the room is the guy with good questions. Okay? All right. Now,
Erica wants to talk to you on the phone.
On that note, Terry, will you lead us in closing?
Yeah, I walked into that. I'm sorry. Okay. All right. It's interesting. We're coming up on Mother's Day, and we're talking about families and stuff. And Mother's Day started with a lady in West Virginia in the 1900, and it took only took 8 years from the time she started until it became a national holiday, declared by the president in 1908, Mother's Day. But it was on a Mother's Day in 1910 out in Washington State where a lady said that she was raised by a single dad and she wanted to honor her dad. And so she started a campaign. But I don't know if you know this or not, but it didn't become a legal holiday, Father's Day, until 1972. I looked it up. You can look it up. I mean, and that was probably because Hallmark decided to do that. But the point is that being a dad is not easy, but it does matter. Okay, and do you know on Father's Day, and this statistic does come from Hallmark. 45% of all Father's Day cards are humorous. Only 6% of Mother's Day cards are humorous. It's all about all they've done and how thankful you are. When it comes to Dad, they tell jokes. Okay, so it's a little harder sometimes for us to be, but we got to understand that everything happens and family matters. All right, so with that regard, let's talk just for a minute now about you and your family, and we're going to go back to Joshua chapter 24, and there's 2 verses, and this is at the named after, of course, the guy who wrote the book, Joshua. And Joshua chapter 24 is they're about to cross into the promised land. In verse 14 and 15, everything we're going to say from here on out is going to be related to that. Okay? So, here it is. Joshua 24, verses 14 and 15. Therefore, fear the Lord and worship him in sincerity and truth. Get rid of gods your father worshiped beyond the Euphrates River and in Egypt, and worship the Lord. But if it doesn't please you to worship the Lord, choose for yourselves today which will you worship, the gods of your fathers worship beyond the Euphrates River, or the gods of the Amorites in whose land you are living. As for me and my family, we will worship the Lord. We will worship the Lord. Now, so here's the first thing. It's a present choice. In other words, you've got to choose. In fact, this is the Old Testament's written in Hebrew, and it's a Hebrew command. And this type of command is only given in the positive. It's not a negative thing. It's choose. You got to choose. It's one way or the other. It does matter. All choices carry weight. And you got to choose because your choices, your choices are like today. You choose every day. You get choices. You get out of bed, you get to make choices. This is my computer, which serves also as my calendar. I have a calendar on my phone. I know I know where I'm supposed to be tomorrow, okay? I know that. But my calendar doesn't give me all the choices I have to make. Your calendar will dictate some things, but you've got to make that choice. Because while you're still here, you get to make a choice. And so he says, choose today. Choose now. So you're going to make choices. That's what Joshua says in this verse, that choose for yourself today. Today. It starts right now. The choices you're going to make for your family and how to commit to your family starts with the choices you made. You made a choice to be here today, and I applaud that. There are a ton of other things you could have done. There are projects at home. There are, websites to look at. There's things to do in the garage. There's all sorts of things you could have been doing. But I applaud you for being here this morning. I applaud you. That was a choice, a good choice. But you need to know that choices like that are every day. And so what happens is we get going down the road and choices bring consequences. But we have to understand that every day is a new day. We get to make good choices. We get to make new choices. Some choices we like to make, some we don't. But he said, choose today, starting right now. So guys, I don't care what your calendar looks like. I don't care how you track it. I don't care if you don't even keep a calendar. But know that every day is a fresh start. Every day. And there's a reason why there's the past, there's the present. It's a gift. There's the present. Okay? And sometimes we want to be like the bar that's in the Keys. If you've ever been down the Keys, there's a bar down there, and on the side of the wall, there's this huge thing. You can see it from the road. In big letters. It says, free beer tomorrow. I stopped in there one time, not for the beer. I stopped in there because I wanted to ask the guy. So I said, so tell me, what is that? What's the number one question when people stop here? Oh, he said, that's easy. I said, what's the question? What time do you open tomorrow? That's the number one question. And I always remind him. I said, I'll tell him what time, but I said, I want you to know that it does say free beer tomorrow. Oh, yeah, we'll be here tomorrow. He goes, okay, when you come tomorrow, you know what the sign will say, right? Free beer tomorrow. And they'll still come. He says, some of them will finally just stick around and pay for it, I guess. But but that's the thing we have to understand about our family is that God has put us in this position of choices. And then the next thing he says, choose for yourself. It's a private choice. It's a private choice. And it's now this is a mirror that most of you have already looked in a mirror today, and you're done. You're not going to look at another mirror. You don't need to. Okay? Now, women, oh, they look at multiple mirrors. I mean, they are excited as they can be because they think that mirror in the car was designed, and it was somebody's wife who said, I need a mirror on my side behind the visor. And could you put a light in it so I can see? All right. They sometimes go to the bathroom, not because they have to go to the bathroom, because they want to see a mirror. I mean, dude, I don't have to look. I looked this morning. I'm good. I don't need, by the way, I never have a bad hair day. I just one of those things. But the thing we have to understand about a mirror is you are the man in the mirror. I mean, there's a whole men's ministry entitled The Man in the Mirror. Okay? You are that man that is in the mirror. Okay? Now, you may be older than you used to be. We all are. Okay? And but you are that guy, and so God gives you the right to make a private choice. Choose for yourself today. You get to choose. That's what Joshua said. Joshua didn't say, okay, let's make a group decision. That's not what he said. He said, let's make an individual decision. You do it today, but you got to do it yourself. Okay? You do it yourself. My grandfather used to say, hey, if the phone rings, answer it. So I don't know what this means to you, but answer, because all choices have consequences. And it's important for us to understand the choices we make for our families, we have to do ourselves. Now, there are things that we want our family to do. There are things that we want our kids to do and our grandkids to do. And we're excited when we can see, our kids and we can see them make good choices and all those things. But it comes back to the man in the mirror. Okay? So we have to make sure that we understand that man in the mirror is you. Okay? That man in the mirror is you. And then he goes to the next one. Okay? Is it's a powerful choice. And now, we all know what this is. I don't need to give you a lesson in what this extension cord is, a power cord, whatever you want to call it. But we all know this. It's designed, this one, you can plug more than one thing into it. If something doesn't work, you plug it in. But the most important part of this whole thing is this end. Because if you don't plug this in somewhere, this is just a pretty orange cord. It's nothing you plug in this end is going to work. And if you don't connect to God, it doesn't matter what you do at the other end. If you're not connected, you're not going to get the power you need to live your life. You're not going to get the peace that you need. Okay? And you can't just worry about everything. I was counseling a guy one time, and he says, Pastor, I think I figured it out. I said, okay, what is it? He said, 75% of things I worry about never happen. I go, great. What's your takeaway? Oh, I just need to start worrying about different things. No, that's not your takeaway. Your takeaway is, you're right, things that we worry about. In fact, most of us couldn't stand here and say, well, 1 year ago today, what were you worried about? Most of us couldn't, okay? But a lot of times we worry because we're not plugged in. And we're trying to do it ourselves. And so worry comes along and separates us, and we worry about all those things. We get out of bed worrying about them. We go to bed worrying about it. In fact, most people, that's when they do their best worrying, is at night. Okay? Now, my first wife's which sounds strange me saying that, but my first wife's mother's still alive. She's 92. And I've always told her she's a professional worrier. She said, why do you say that? I said, well, you're the only person who's ever said to me, you know what? Sometimes I worry that I worry too much. I said, you're a professional. I mean, I've never met anybody that told me, I've met people who said they worry. I've never met anybody that said one of their worries was that they worry too much. And so I think in our life, we need to understand that when we're trying to do it on our power, and we're trying to make decisions on our power, that it's a powerful decision, and that's why he even says, again, emphasizing today, but see, opportunities can be stolen by time. I mean, if you wait around, all those choices are gone. Opportunities can be stopped by time. We can't let it get away from us, this power. We can't let, the fact that Joshua said, you get to choose. You get to choose. As a powerful position to be in. And that's where we are. And that's why it's a powerful decision. Because we still do get to choose. Okay? And there does come a time. Okay? The older guys in the room. Okay? You have fewer choices you get to make. Just because there's things you can't do. So you don't even have to worry about them anymore. Because those choices are gone. Okay? But it's not just an age thing. We all have to make sure that we are plugged in so that we still get to make choices. Because that's what God wants. God could have made us like robots, but he didn't. He didn't. He made us like people that get to choose. We get to choose. And he's given us, and that's a powerful position to be in. All right? And as we try to work with our families, we need to understand we still get to help them. No matter what the situation is. If we can get ourselves and them plugged into the power source, it gives the opportunity for things to work. But we've got to keep coming back to that how powerful it is. Because this in and of itself has no power. It's pointless. But if I can plug it into any outlet in here, and I can run stuff off of it. It becomes important. And listen, so you need to be plugged into God so that when you make choices, your choices have God consequences. Okay? All right. So, Joshua continues on in this he talks about it's a personal choice. Okay? And he says this when he talks about who are you going to worship? Who are you going to worship? Now, some of us get the idea that worship only happens when we have one of these. Okay? Which don't exist too many places anymore. Okay? I mean, this is a precious one. It's the only one I have. Okay? I talked to a young pastor who had his 5-year-old son, and they went to a traditional church on a Sunday night. His 5-year-old son had never been in a church with pews, never. And so he saw these in the racks. He saw these books. So he asked his dad, "What's the book? Is that a Bible?" He says, "No, it's a hymnal." So he opened it for his son. And they started singing a song, and he found the page number. A 5-year-old boy says, "Dad, what a great idea. We need to get these. Why? Look, the words are right here. I got them in my hand. I can see them." And that 5-year-old boy had never seen a hymnal in his life. But to him, it was something that helped him. Now, there was a time where that's the reason they went with hymnals, okay? Now, not so much, okay? We used to get a call a week from church is trying to, hey, we're giving away our hymnals. You know anybody wants them? I said, no. Just like giving away pews. I can't find anybody that wants pews either. Okay? People usually call and say, we want to sell them. I said, good luck. All right? But anyway, this idea of worship, okay? This idea of worship is, it's not just a Sunday morning experience. When he says this, he talks about the gods of the people in Egypt, the gods in the foreign land where you're going, or the real God. It's our relationship with God is what he's talking about. Yes, it might involve sometimes singing. Okay. Now I'm a terrible singer. My worship leader used to say, Craig, we'll have you sing at the 2:30 service. I said, we don't have a 2:30 service. He said, exactly. Everybody should be gone by then, and you won't hurt anybody. And so, but it's not a matter of can you sing or you're in the choir. It's not just that kind of worship. The kind of worship he's talking about is what you do Monday through Saturday. It's how you view life, what you think is important. How, he said, if you think those other gods, those foreign gods are the ones you're going to follow all week, that's what you need to do. But if you're going to follow the true God, if you're going to worship is not just what you do on Sunday morning, okay? And I know that you don't get out of bed thinking about the pastor's sermon on Tuesday. I know you don't. Okay, as a young pastor, somebody told me I should call 5 people in the church and ask them what I preached on Sunday to see how good a job I was doing. I can tell you I did it one time, folks. One time. Never again, because all 5 had no idea. You know, now they remembered some of the stories I told or something that, you know, a joke or something, but, you know, and so I never did that after that. Never. But to me, it's not what you do while you're in this room that matters as much as you do this afternoon or Wednesday morning, and how much of this stuff that's where your worship is. That's what worship. You know, there was a guy that they wrote a song. It's out. What happens if all the music stops and there's no music? What do we do? What do we do? That's when we worship. It's not just it's not, you know, the whole experience on Sunday is worship. I would agree with that. But it's more than that. Okay? It's who you follow. Okay? And people wake up and the first thing they do is, you know, they check things on their phone or wherever, okay, every morning. Okay? So my question is, when you wake up, what do you think? How are you going to worship God? How are you going to lead your family? How are you going to expect something of them that you're not even doing? Okay? It's important for our families to see and know that we care about God. We worship God on Tuesdays, on Thursdays, Friday nights. Doesn't matter. And I'm not saying you got to be perfect. I don't want you to be so heavenly minded you're no earthly good. I don't want that. But I do want you to know that worship is not just holding a hymnal and singing on Sunday morning, and then you can say, I worshiped this week. I'm done. I'll see you next Sunday. Okay? It's more than that. It's more than that. And so when you go through this, you need to see that. Okay? Now, and the last thing that he says is it's a pressure choice. Pressure. And here's why. He says, the God your fathers worshipped, or the gods of the Amorites. In other words, other people are watching what we do. You realize you are the only Bible some people ever read? You are it. There's people that never pick up a Bible. I was able, through the death of my wife, lead my next door neighbor, who had been my next door neighbor for 23 years, to the Lord. He actually finally came to church. He came to the funeral. And I'm going to shorten the story, but he had no idea of anything in the Bible. So we started reading in the book of John. We get to John chapter 2, and that's the story where Jesus turns the water into wine. And he looked at me and said, "That's a Bible story?" I go, "Yeah, where'd you think it came from?" He said, "I thought some wino made that up, you know? I can't believe that's a Bible story." And he had spent his whole life in the South, around churches, around people. He had no idea about the things of the Bible. And I asked him after he prayed to receive Christ, him and his wife both, I said, "What changed? I was your next door neighbor for 23 years. I invited you to church. I tried to talk to you, you know." He said, "We watched your wife die." And he said, "You know that old country song, 'Live Like You Were Dying'? We watched." She became the Bible we didn't read. Someday in heaven, you know, my wife was turning flips the day Gary and Amanda prayed to receive Christ. Because they told me that was the only Bible we read. We watched your wife. We watched you. And took a long time. But hey, they got eternity now. As he told me, he said, "Yep, we're going to be forever neighbors." I said, "Yep, we are." But there's that onward influence. Not only the outside people, but the future. Listen, the next generation. I just want to tell you, the things you're doing now, okay, especially the older guys in the room, the things you're doing now, is you need to look at it like this. You're planting shade trees that you will never see the shade. I can guarantee you, any of these trees around here that produce shade, the people that planted them, the majority of those people are gone. Because by the time the tree gets big enough where you can enjoy the shade, your life's over. But that's what you're doing, because that's the next generation. And that's some of the things you do for this church, for your families. The things you're doing is you're planting shade trees for the next generation. Because you don't know. And it's going to be a lot harder. Not only it's hard now, but you go 2 generations, go 2 cliques, and how hard it's going to be to follow God. It's getting harder. It's getting harder. There's not a pastor out there that won't tell you it's harder to even get people to consider coming to church. It's just getting harder. And that starts in the family. Goes back to what I said about the community that I live in. My eyes have been opened in a big way very quickly. Just how chaotic families are. And I thought I had problems. Mine aren't even close to what some of these are. But that onward influence. So, I want to end with showing you something. Not that I haven't already showed you something, but I want to show you something. This is a Bible. It's 112 years old. And in the middle, there's a section that with the family that bought it, and it starts with the father, the mother, and then all the kids, and the day they were born, and then on the other column is the day they died. And then the next generation, and then the third generation is in here. And in that first generation, there was a mom and a dad, and 9 kids. 9 kids. You can see all their births. And then when you go over and see their deaths, out of that first family of 11, over a 6-week period, that family of 11 was a family of 4. It was in 1920, and typhoid fever came and got the oldest daughter, who was a nurse. And in those days, they brought the family member home to the home for people to come visit. A little side note, they used to put them in the front room, okay? And somebody would stay with them the whole time. It's called sitting up with the dead. And in the 1950s, when after World War II and the suburbs, and they were trying to think of some way to start building houses that all looked the same, and they wanted to change that mentality of that front room as being the room of death. And so they came up with the term living room. That's where it came from. Okay? So this 20-year-old nurse came home. She had died, and typhoid spread in over 6 weeks. The father and more of the kids died, and you can see their birth. And the youngest one who died was 4. The dad was 41. And so they were down to this family of 4. It was a mom and 3 daughters. One of those daughters, the youngest, was 9. And she began to pray, even while her family was dying, that God would spare her family. And even her sister died in the bed with her. But as she grew up into being a teenager, she always wondered why her. Why did God spare her? And so she began to pray for her future family as a teenager. She got married and had 4 kids. And she had thought when she grew up maybe she could go be a missionary or go tell people about Jesus, but it never worked out. She had some other health problems, and so she just became a mom. And she had 4 kids, so she began to pray for her 4 kids. Maybe God will send one of these kids, but I'm going to try to live a life with my husband that honors him no matter what. I'm not a missionary, but I'll make this family my mission field. And so she began to pray for her 4 kids. And those 4 kids grew up. None of them ever went into ministry at all, but they all got married and had their kids. So now we're into the 3rd generation in this same family Bible. Okay? And this 9-year-old girl, in 1988, she died. And on her deathbed, I sat with her. And that's how I got this Bible. And so we went through the story, and she explained it to me. And she goes, you know, I prayed when I was 9 years old that I could have an impact on my family, and that maybe my family someday would love Jesus, and maybe even one of them would go tell people about Jesus. And she said, you know, it took all these years, but God answered that prayer. And I can tell you that story because that was my grandmother. And my name's in this book. I don't tell you this story. I know you're probably thinking this guy was hit by lightning. Now he's in a book. Maybe they should make a movie about this guy. But when I started thinking about family, I became the curator of this family Bible. And I started thinking about choices that, even at 9 years old, my grandmother made. And I know this is a men's thing. Now, my grandfather, he loved Jesus too. But she grew up without a dad because at 9 years old her dad died. But she's still committed to following. And guys, we don't know how long we have, but we have a family tree of some kind. And you may think sometimes it's like a vine rather than a tree, but we all can influence our family. And as Joshua stood before all those people and said to those men, choose today who you will worship. As for me and my family, we'll worship the Lord. It's not just a Bible verse. It's real. And that's what you guys have got to do. You've got to stand like Joshua and say, as for me, I don't care what the rest of the world does. I don't even care what the guys at my table do. As for me and my family, we're going to follow God. We're going to commit to God. And we're going to commit to our family. Okay? All right. So here's what I want to do. I want to take about 5 minutes. You got another set of questions, similar but a little different. I want you to just take 5 minutes. We'll take about 5 minutes, and then we'll take another 10-minute break or so, and then we'll come back for the final session. Okay? All right, so just take a minute, turn to that section 2, and we'll go from there.